Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Broadview Magazine's National Online Reading Club. You all knew that. You knew you were coming here. My name is Julie Carl, and I'm the section editor of Broadview's United Church in Focus section. Working behind the scenes with me tonight is Sharon Doran, who's Broadview's promotions, fundraising, and classifieds manager. And if we get in trouble, she will sort us all out. We're both really glad you decided to come and spend an hour with us tonight. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat, the original owners and custodians of this land. Today, Toronto is home to many people, including a diverse urban Indigenous community of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis people. Storytelling is an important element of Indigenous culture, and as storytellers, we at Broadview honor that, and we work hard to continue the legacy of fine storytelling on this land. We'd love to know who you are, so please say hello in the chat space and tell us where you are. And if you're part of a faith community and you want to add that as well, type away, just put that right in there. And if you want to add your own land acknowledgement from wherever you are right now, I invite you to please do that as well. It's great for us all to know each other just a little bit better. And maybe by the end of the evening, we'll know each other a lot better. Sharon is going to demonstrate how you do that. She's muted.
Sorry, just at the bottom of your screen there, you'll see a little chat box. We have 3 messages there now, and you can just type in there. There we go.
Oh, some people have found it. Okay, we got Lindsay from Cambridge and Leaf in Edmonton and somebody in Calgary, Thornbury, Toronto. So I have a few housekeeping notes before we get started to keep us all neat and tidy and on the right path. So we are recording this session so we can share it later on with others. And if you aren't comfortable with that, now's your moment to turn off your video so you will not have your little video showing up in the thumbnail. And I think that's probably quite easy to do, or would you like Sharon to explain it? It's just click on the little camera that says stop video at the bottom. And please mute your audio or Sharon will mute it for you. And that's a promise, not a threat. We're just trying to keep everybody in line. Turn on the chat function, which I think you've already done, so we can see what's up, and hover over the cursor at the bottom and you'll click on it and you're in. I'm also going to recommend that you use the speaker view, and I should probably do that so I match you so that you can see who's speaking rather than the whole gallery view, unless you want to watch everybody. That's in the top right corner. No, that's there. I found it. There's Sharon. Hello. So this evening, we're going to hear from Yvonne Lau, Carrie Martens, and Pete Bombaci, whose work is featured in our first issue of 2024. And as a special treat, we also have a cameo from the Right Reverend Dr. Carmen Lansdowne, moderator of the United Church of Canada, who's going to bring greetings and tell you about her own reading club. And a final note before we begin, because I promise we're getting to the program soon, very soon. After our speakers have told us a bit about themselves and their stories, and you have a chance to ask questions, Sharon will post in the chat space instructions on how to ask your questions. I have some ready, but it's going to be way better if you guys take part, because the conversations are always better than interviews. So please don't hold back. If you are not comfortable saying your question, type it in the chat, and I can, if we have time, I will get to it, I promise, and I will read it for you. Or you can just say, I have a question, and we'll call on you, and you can ask your question yourself. We're going to get started now. The Right Reverend Dr. Carmen Lansdowne is the 44th moderator of the United Church of Canada, as I said. She was born in Alert, British Columbia, and is a member of the Heiltsuk First Nation. She was elected last year for a 3-year term, and I'm now going to hand the floor or the screen over to her. Over to you, Dr. Carmen.
Thanks, Julie. And it's nice. Julie is, as in her role as the section editor for the United Church, is also my editor for my Christmas and Easter messages. And so it's been great working with you virtually by email. And now I can put a face to your name. Just one quick clarification. I was born in Alert Bay, British Columbia, not Alert Northwest Territories. So not quite as far north, just off the northeast coast of Vancouver Island. It's so good. I know I've said this a bunch of times on different United Church related Zoom calls, but every time I start to see names from all across the country pop up, whether I know you or not, I get this feeling that my son did when he first started talking and went to the park. I just feel like all my friends are here. And I will be staying for the whole hour. I'm really interested to hear from all three of our speakers. And I had the opportunity to hear Pete be what you were called the lightning keynote at the Toronto Foundation's launch of their vital signs report late last year. And I think we're in for a real treat to hear him talk about his work. But also just because I try really hard not to fly in and fly out and make things a moderator show, that when I participate in things in the church, I like to just stay and be present to the life and work of our church. And so I'm really happy to join you tonight. For those of you who were here last month, sorry for the confusion. We somehow missed the registration link and I never got the link. I was supposed to come and say hi last month. So just trying to keep you all on your toes. You may or may not have heard that I started as part of the Flourishing project work that I'm doing, a national book club, realizing that I will never get to all 2,500-ish communities of faith across the country. I will never get to meet everybody. And I have a huge love of books. I read 54 books cover to cover last year and had about 17 on the go at the end of the year. Thought it would be great to have online virtual conversations with people no matter where they are across the country. It's through the ChurchX platform, which is our online learning platform in the United Church. If you go to the Moderators Flourishing page on the United Church website, there is a link to the registration page. And it's really designed to be like super low key, like you just are having a book club with your friends. So you do not have to have read the books to come. You certainly don't have to have finished them cover to cover. The Zoom calls are recorded, and so they stay available in ChurchX as sort of an evergreen resource, so that also if there's a book that you find that's meaningful and you would like to go back and use that as a congregational resource, if you're a lay leader or paid accountable minister in your congregation, that you have that as an additional resource for reflection time. And I tried to choose books that matter, and from a variety of Canadian and other authors across a variety of social and environmental and faith issues. So this spring, on January 25th, we're going to be reading The Long Road Home by Deborah Thompson. She is a woman of African Canadian descent who's been, her family has been in Canada for 4 or 5 generations. No, longer than that, I think, like 4 or 5 generations. About her experience of growing up Black in Canada, and then doing a postdoc and teaching as a Black professor in the United States, and how when she came home. And so much of the anti-Black racism literature that's available and that many people are engaging with in the church is really based in the American context. And because it's her personal story, it's a very engaging read, but she also translates a lot of that to the Black experience in Canada. And really, and she's going to be joining me as my guest to discuss it. So you'll have an opportunity to hear from the author. And then in February, on February 22nd, Andrew Winston, who's one of the co-authors of Net Positive, How Companies Who Give More Than They Take Can Thrive. He wrote the book with Paul Pullman, who is the CEO of Unilever, which is, I think, one of like the top 5 biggest corporations in the world. And Andrew, I've known for a couple of years, is a sort of Fortune 100 ESG consultant and speaker and writer. And he's a really lovely and engaging speaker. So he'll be there to discuss their book, Net Positive. I haven't yet totally figured out who the guest is going to be for our Lenten study in March. But we're reading the Act Fast Lenten Resource Guide published by the United Church Publishing House this spring. And then there's a little spoiler alert. I mean, no spoiler alert. Later in the spring, we're also going to read Brahma and the Beggar Boy, which is an epic poem written by a United Church poet here in the Lower Mainland, Renee Sacklikar, and she's an award-winning poet. And it's sort of a futuristic dystopian novel. It starts off with something very similar to COVID, which was really gripping and caught my attention. And she started that part of the poem like 14 years ago. And so really excited to have her come and join us as well later in the spring. So thanks so much, and I'll turn it back over to Julie.
Thank you very much. So our first speaker is Yvonne Lau, who's coming to us from Calgary tonight, isn't it? I thought it was going to be Vancouver, but it's Calgary.
I'm actually currently in Toronto.
You're in Toronto?
Yes, warm Toronto tonight.
Okay, all right. So you're here for the snowstorm tomorrow. That'd be lovely.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to make my flight out.
Yes, hopefully. She's a features and news journalist reporting on the intersection of business and society with an eye on China and Russia. Her work has been published in Fortune, Forbes, Maclean's, Canada's National Observer, and of course, Broadview, and many more. She is a recipient of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada's 2003-2024 Media Fellowship. She's a part of Room Up Front's this year cohort of BIPOC mentee photojournalists and is interested in visual storytelling that examines identity, collective memory, and coming of age. Her photos documenting life in China-Russia border towns have been featured in, I'm sorry, Neocha? Am I saying it right? And
Yeah,
Gold
correct.
Thread in the South China Morning Post. So I'm handed over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you so much, Julie, for the lovely introduction. Hi, everyone. It's really a privilege to be chatting with you all tonight. I'm certainly no prolific public speaker like my other panel mates, so thank you for bearing with me for the next few minutes. I'm really excited to be talking to you about my story in Broadview's latest issue, where I wrote about the ongoing oppression of the Uyghur people, what I believe to be one of the most pressing and urgent issues in our world today. Specifically, the story looks at young Uyghurs living in Istanbul who are pinning their hopes for a new life in Canada soon. As you may know, last February, the Canadian Parliament passed Bill M62, a motion that will resettle 10,000 Uyghurs starting this year, actually. So I spoke to these young people about how and why they went to Turkey and how their journeys essentially led them to be first effectively exiled from their homelands in Xinjiang, China, and two, also torn apart from their families. So the magazine piece traces the journeys of 28-year-old Iparhan. She's a young woman who works in e-commerce during the day. She studies marketing at night. And at age 12, she started her own English language tutoring firm back in her hometown in Xinjiang. It also looks at the story of 26-year-old Abdul Qadir. He's an activist and international relations graduate who's also an outspoken advocate for the Uyghur community, as well as 23-year-old Abdul. He's a recent graduate of Istanbul University who taught himself English, and he also works as a volunteer tour guide on the weekends. So all three individuals, they lost contact with their families about 6 or 7 years ago when they went to Turkey to study. When the Chinese government started intensifying its crackdown against the Uyghur people in the mid-2010s, Uyghurs abroad, such as the protagonist you'll see in the magazine story, stopped hearing from their family members. So eventually, Iparhan, Abdul Qadir, and Abdul, they learned that their family members had been taken to Xinjiang's internment camps, which China officially calls re-education camps for work and skills training. Basically, their efforts to find or contact family members only brought them more pain. After Iparhan's mother was released from the camps, she found Iparhan on WeChat, which is a Chinese messaging app. And fearing for her daughter's safety, she told Iparhan to never contact her again. Abdul Qadir heard that his brother was released from prison a few years ago, but was disabled because of beatings he received while in the camps. Abdul, meanwhile, he found his younger siblings on Douyin, which is the Chinese version of TikTok, a short video app, but his father was nowhere to be found in any photos or videos. Abdul told me that I could see no happiness on my mother's face. He shortly deleted the app, fearing for his and his own family's safety. Another young woman who's pursuing her PhD in Turkey and taking care of her 9-year-old daughter had searched for her parents for many years. She was especially close to her dad, who encouraged her to pursue her studies all her life. We had met in July, and only a few days after, she found out that her father had died in the camps. Their testimonies were very heartbreaking to hear. You'll understand, once you read the magazine piece, and really bears witness to the ongoing cultural erasure and oppression of the Uyghur people in China and abroad right now. So I felt that this story was very important to write about. I had been following the plight of the Uyghur community for several years. Essentially, we see that, the evidence of China's oppression is really overwhelming. The testimonies of people are really gut-wrenching. Uyghurs have lost family members. They've been subject to intense and high-tech surveillance in Xinjiang, and had also suffered in the camps as well. It reminded me of my university days, a time when people were still talking about Tibet, actually, and the oppression that Tibetan people have faced. Back then, I was working on a project that aimed to bring together young Tibetans and Chinese students in Canada just to get to know each other and to talk and build bridges between the two communities. I remember how difficult it was just to get Chinese people in the room. People were so fearful to talk about a topic sensitive to China. They were also indifferent and didn't believe that this oppression was ongoing. So I see so many similarities in sort of the oppression that's happening against the Uyghur community today. So we see the Free Tibet movement had a lot of mainstream support back in the day, and even Hollywood celebrities like Richard Gere had supported the cause, but we see that Tibet has now largely faded from public discourse. So what's happening to Uyghurs in Xinjiang and abroad really reminded me of those days. Last year, I was actually catching up with a distant relative from mainland China, a very kind and soft-spoken engineer educated in Canada who, grew up on Western media and was educated in Canada, but he really doesn't believe that, this oppression in Xinjiang is going on. So eventually I knew that it was impossible to stay silent any longer. I felt particularly, I don't know if guilty is the right word, but burdened as a person of Chinese heritage. I thought it was the very least I could do to educate myself about the issue and write about it, and to really echo these Uyghur voices that were advocating for their families and their communities. Sorry, Julie, I think you're on mute right now.
And follow the rules. Thank you very much for that. I'm sure people have questions. You said if you read the article, I'm sure people read the article. It was fascinating. I was on the edge of my seat. It was heart-wrenching, really. So I'm just going to ask you some questions until people start to put some things in. So you started to explain why you were drawn to this story because it reminded you of what Tibetan people had gone through, and now they had sort of disappeared from the headlines. Is that why you thought this story was the one to tell?
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely one factor. And I spent the summer in Istanbul in Turkey, and after meeting with so many Uyghurs in the community, I knew I was writing a story about them for sure. I had initially focused my attention on young mothers with children in the community, but after interviewing so many young Uyghurs, their stories really resonated with me, especially how close they were to their families and their parents, and especially the young woman Ibrahan featured in the first section of the story, and her relationship with her own mother, and how that has just all just vanished now,
Yeah.
essentially.
And this is the young woman who can't even speak to her mother because that might put her in danger. Do I have the right person in mind?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So how did you find these sources? They seem to tell the story quite perfectly. What were your connections to find them?
At first, I was connected with many rights groups and activists, as well as academics and community leaders in the Uyghur community abroad who have done great work. So the community is well connected, and eventually one connection just led to another. And I started spending a lot of time with these sources in their own neighborhoods and lesser known parts of Istanbul, and just really got to know them over the course of several months, and how they lived their lives and spent their days in Istanbul.
Okay, how long? I mean, you said that we all used to be aware of Tibet. Now we're aware of the Uyghurs. How long had it been going on before it caught the world's attention? I mean, the re-education and the harassment. I mean, it's more than harassment, but
Yeah, I think I mean, the conflict has been going on for decades, but I think under the Xi Jinping administration in the mid-2010s, when the authorities really started intensifying this crackdown against the Uyghur people. And I think what really maybe helped was, sort of the advent of the internet and social media. And we saw investigations from, really reputable outlets, like the BBC and the Financial Times, and they had done investigations with satellite imagery, as well as think tanks and the like, that really gave evidence and supported the claims that there was, oppression and torture and forced labor happening at these labor camps in Xinjiang.
Okay, Elizabeth McDonald has a question. Elizabeth? There you are.
Yep, thank you very much. There we go. Okay, this is so interesting. I'm wondering, I was struck by two comments you've made. One where you use the word authorities, but earlier than that, Yvonne, you spoke about, and I want to get this correct, what this has been like for you as a Chinese Canadian. So where that has taken me is about when we speak about what's going on in this particular situation and in others, I'm struck with how easy it is to use words like the Chinese do ABC. When we talk about our own country, we're really specific. We talk about the politicians, or we talk about the police. We don't simply say Canadians. But when we're talking about other situations, it's so easy. Do you have any thoughts about how we can be clear in our own thinking and speaking in talking about who's responsible for the oppression?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That's a really pertinent point, and thank you for bringing that up. I feel the same as you. I think, yeah, it's absolutely very important to distinguish that it is the administration of the People's Republic of China that is carrying out this oppression. And I think that for us in Canada, there's a lot of talk about sort of security concerns and sort of the long arm of the Chinese government in terms of being able to reach activists and those who sort of are against the Chinese state here in Canada and other countries. And sorry, I just lost my train of thought. And yeah, the use of language is really important. And I think something I've been thinking about a lot is while these security concerns are very well-founded, there are certainly security concerns. There's also perhaps a little bit of fear-mongering going on as well. So it's a very complex issue. And yeah, and sorry, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth, the use of language is very important. And I think one book I turn to a lot is a book by David Livingstone Smith called what is it called? It's a book called Less Than Human, Why We Demean, Enslave, and Exterminate Others. And it's a really interesting and an important book on the use of language and how important that is in the use of violence, conflict, and wars throughout our history.
Thank you so much. I'm going to check that book. Thank you.
Thank you. And Leif Gregerson has a question. Is there anything you can suggest that Canadians can do to help these oppressed people? And they give as an example, contact politicians, write letters, donate to the Red Cross. And that was actually one of the questions on my list, because I knew United Church members would want to be able to do something about it. What could people do to help?
Definitely. I think just being aware and educated on the issue. So reading different books. One book that I referenced in the article is he's an academic from Simon Fraser University, Darren Byler, and he talks in his book, he talks about, the testimonies of Uyghurs who had, gone through the camps, etc. I would also definitely take a look at Uyghur Wellness Initiative, which is a volunteer-run project based in the US that is also referenced in the story. They do a lot of work that supports the mental health and emotional well-being of diasporic Uyghurs, which is also what the story is about. Other organizations to take a look at are URAP. I think they're Ottawa and Montreal based, so the Uyghur Rights Association Project. So I believe these organizations are always looking for, if not volunteers, then advocates as well. Yeah, that's.
Okay,
Mhm.
we don't have to be helpless in the face of it. We can do something. Thank you very much for that. We're going to move on now to Reverend Carrie Martens. She's the minister for Pembina Parish, which includes St. Paul's United Church in Morden, Manitoba, and Zion Calvin United in Darlingford. As the solo minister, she does everything, a little bit of everything, she says. She was admitted into ordered ministry in the United Church in 2021, and before that, she was ministering in the Mennonite Church of Canada. She lives with her partner and their 3-year-old in Morden, which is, as she puts it, within southern Manitoba's Bible Belt. She was a source in Josiah Newfield's story in this month's magazine about how the church supports the LGBTQ community. And I'm going to turn the screen now over to Carrie.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I feel a bit in awe that I'm just a source. I'm not the writer of this amazing piece by Josiah. He's an amazing writer. But I feel honored to be able to join with you today and be part of this conversation. This isn't the kind of conversation I ever really imagined that I was going to be part of. Until 3 years ago, I was a minister with Mennonite Church Canada, and I was working in a largish multi-staff church in Kitchener, Ontario. And my church was affirming, and my partner and I were comfortable there, and the rainbow community was really well represented in our neighborhood. But for a whole host of reasons that I won't get into here, I entered ministry in the United Church of Canada and returned to the Bible Belt of southern Manitoba, where I grew up. I moved to Morden in November of 2020 with my partner and our then 2-month-old baby during lockdown.
Oh.
And being a queer family in Morden has been honestly relatively good for us. It's certainly not nearly as diverse or openly affirming as Kitchener. We do experience microaggressions, like folks repeatedly referring to me as my daughter's grandmother, since clearly 2 women can't have a child together, or filling out forms that don't apply for our family, or once an inappropriate question about my child's parentage. But generally, the community is a really good one. It's a warm place. The folks are warm and respectful. But I think that being an affirming church is a bit more difficult journey, actually, because there is something about queerness and the church that is particularly challenging out here. And there are a lot of churches in our community, and less than a handful are affirming. So Morden has 2. We have 9,000 people and 2 affirming churches. And the nearby community of Winkler has 15,000 people and no affirming churches. So there's just not a lot of that presence. And it's honestly a little hard to ignore a stranger just calling you up on the phone and letting you know that you are leading your congregation to hell for condoning the lifestyle of folks in your community. So our parish became affirming in 2021, and it happened actually quite quietly. We were in the midst of the pandemic. So most of the ire in our neighborhoods and in our area was directed toward pandemic restrictions and the restriction of personal freedoms. That was a really big deal out here. A lot of people, part of the convoy movements and things like that. But once all those restrictions started to lift, the focus shifted toward the rainbow community, particularly targeting folks who are trans and non-binary or gender fluid. And the irrational fear of folks who aren't cisgender or heterosexual led to petitions to remove books in our libraries that they said were erotic or pornographic and thus illegal based on the Criminal Code of Canada. All the books, to my knowledge, are basic sex education books. I have one on my church library shelf. But a lot of that kind of got stirred up. And our church wrote a letter to our regional library staff of absolute support. We don't have people who are pro book banning in our congregation, but it just became very frothy with lots of petitions moving around in our community. In 2023, our church rented space for an event. We rented to the local and provincial arts councils for a drag brunch, and that brought considerable pushback. It wasn't even our event, but it was happening in our church. And so we got phone calls at the church. I was called by people like more than an hour away from our community, questioning me and talking for a long time about why we were wrong. And we put together an official statement for our office administrator because we thought it just wasn't fair for her to keep having to field these questions on an ongoing basis. And we didn't like that she was being put in such a difficult position all the time. And one individual came in and served us with personal papers of liability and videoed our office administrator receiving those papers of liability. And fortunately or unfortunately, we already had seen this happen because they served papers to our city councils during the pandemic, and they'd also served papers to our libraries. So we kind of had some background to this, and their lawyers had already gone through stuff. So we're already like, okay, we had some idea what was going on. But in anticipation of further protests to the drag event, we created a positive presence on our parking lot along with Pembina Valley Pride, our local pride group. And we had about 30 people out on the lot who rotated in minus 20-degree weather, being a presence on the parking lot. And we had to, usher vehicles a couple of times off the lot. They had People's Party and freedom fighter flags and handmade signs saying like Happy Pedophile Day, and they yelled slurs at us. And a couple of other young people tried handing out tracts and things. And we luckily had some really great volunteers who could talk to them and eventually help them to move on without any real disruption. And though we had only a handful of protesters who showed up, it was really clear that they would go as far as we would allow them to go. Every time we gave a little, they'd come a little closer. So we just didn't give a little. And so we filled the lot with rainbow flags and music and good cheer. And we were just really grateful for all the support that we received. But clearly things were ramping up in our community and continually so. And during Pride Month, there was a flag set on fire on a second floor balcony in the nearby town. And we had our ribbons up on our poles in front of the church for Pride Month. And we had done that 2 years earlier when we became affirming, and there had been no response. But we were pretty sure something was going to happen this year. And so they were ripped down, I think, 6 times over the course of Pride Month. And every time we put them back up, we got notes from queer folks in town expressing appreciation, saying that this felt like their one sign of hope that not all Christianity was homophobic. And right now I have a large inclusive pride flag in my one window and a smaller one in the other window that says safe space. And thus far my windows are intact. So we live in hope.
I was going to ask you, there's in the story, it quotes you talking about a rainbow sticker in your, I think it's in your window, and why you have that up there. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, so our church happens to be like right on the main drag through town, and all the high school students high school and junior high school students walk past our church all the time. And I mean, I know that we have a lot of affirming staff in our high schools, but I also know that we had a junior high student beat up at the skate park just before Pride Month, and just because he was suspected of being queer. So I just really want folks to feel, like our young folks to feel, that when they walk past, this is a church that is not going to say that they're wrong or that they are somehow broken or they need to know they're created in the image of God. And this, like our community has tons of churches, but like we have one other church up the street that's from Mennonite Church Canada, and they're recently affirming, but other than that, there are no openly affirming congregations. So the vast majority of the message coming to people is that being queer is problematic.
It sounds, I mean, you willingly went into that hostile environment. I am I am amazed and filled with awe at you. But what is daily life like? Like, do you ever fearful? Are you fearful for your child?
I'm not sure if fearful is the word. I think there's just, there is a constant state of low level anxiety for everybody who is queer, or everyone who has queer family members, because you just don't know where it's going to happen, right? It does. And you're just always a little bit sitting on that tipping point of anxiety. And that's an interesting wearing kind of place to be.
Yeah.
And as a couple, I think we fly under the radar a lot. One, we're both super comfortable in our own skin, so we don't appear vulnerable. And two, we're a bit older. And also, we present in a very unnoticeable kind of way. I can kind of walk through the street and not be noticed. I'm a little bit invisible that way. But that's not the case for everybody, right? And so there are people who are much more vulnerable than we are in our town. And I really feel for them and for their family members who are just always anxious. Because, I mean, our area we have small communities that are grouped quite close together. And so we know what happens in other towns. Like when there's a trans woman being stalked walking home in a town 20 minutes from here, that anxiety just carries over from one town to the next. So yeah, I think there's this constant low level of anxiety.
I feel like I'm dominating you. If anybody wants to ask a question, okay. Leaf Gregerson again. Thank you very much, Leaf. I've heard that one of the top reasons young people get kicked out of their parents' home is gender identity. This seems like a big city problem. Do you encounter it where you are? And if so, how do you deal with that situation?
I would say that gender identity is definitely really a huge one out here. It is one of the, it's encountered, I think, by the more, by their family members as a very big threat to gender roles and their assumptions about what it means to be part of a family and to be male and female and all those kinds of things. I've spoken at a Gay Straight Alliance at a local high school, and I would say that there aren't a lot of them getting kicked out because they're not coming out.
Oh.
There are a handful that have come out, and they deal with it. They are struggling with boundaries, struggling with how sometimes they're out and one family member is affirming, like if they have divorced parents, they'll have one household that is and one that isn't. So they have the tension of moving back and forth between their gender identities when they go from one house to the other. So I would say that, yeah, it does not feel like a safe place, I think, for people to come out. So we have some, and there's some affirming families in the area who have kids who have come out, but there are definitely ones that all wait until they graduate and leave here before they do that work because it's not a safe space.
Sad. It's so sad.
May I ask a question? It's David Lee.
Absolutely.
Just pushing things in the more dangerous direction, or asking a question. It sounds as though there hasn't been too much actual violence, which is obviously to be hoped for, but sometimes can happen in various places. I wonder what would it take, that's perhaps the wrong way to put it around, but what kind of occasion might give rise to a situation where violence could arise? It sounds as though there's hostility, clearly, but it's sort of low enough key that it doesn't erupt. What would make things erupt? Or maybe nothing there. I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
Well, I think that's a really interesting question, because I think that's what we wonder all the time is how far can it, like, at what point are we going to hit the tipping point, right? Because things build on each other and people get bolder and bolder. And we saw that happening throughout Pride Month. And it was almost like everyone breathed a sigh of relief when Pride Month was over, we were excited to have Pride Month, and we were grateful that we got through our Pride weekend here and our Pride March without incident. But we also had Winnipeg sent out security for our Pride March, and there was a wall of love that blocked people during that event as well. And so I think we're regularly doing things to try to keep things as controlled as possible so that we don't get to that point. But when, like, we just had like stuff torn down from our church, right? But then a block away, one night, people smashed things across somebody's front of their house. All of their pots and everything were smashed because they were in rainbow colors or whatever. And then that same night, an hour later, they tore something down off of somebody else's house. And so we would see that every time something happens, then it starts to like spiral into something else. So in a lot of ways, we felt like we, just kind of got through Pride Month and just went, and then it was July 1st and everyone seemed to forget about us again. And so it always feels like we go through these cycles of it kind of ramps up and then it kind of dips off again until we don't know when. So we don't know the answer to that.
Wow.
With someone, Gillian McLean has posted Acts 17:22-34. We are all one blood, offspring of God. A nice thing to keep in mind. Leif Gregerson asks his last question for you, Carrie. A member of the clergy, do you receive counseling training when you educate yourself for your position?
Yeah, for sure. I would have received pastoral care training when I was doing this, when I was training for ministry. The degree to which we got into some of the things that we experience now for pastoral care, they could never have prepared us. I was never prepared for ushering vehicles off of parking lots. That was just not part of my my training. What they did train me for, though, was listening and helpful referring. And I feel like that's been my greatest skill, is being able to listen and hear people's stories and hear where their souls are at, what pain is painful for them, and figuring out where to direct them for the best support. And fortunately, we are getting more queer-friendly counselors in town, which is huge because we've had almost none. Most of the counselors in the area are faith-based and generally haven't been affirming. So we are now starting to get like queer-friendly counseling agencies.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, thank you very much. You could go on all night, and I'm sure we'd all be fascinated, but I'm going to have to move on for time. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And our next guest is Pete Bombaci. He isn't speaking, so you can't see him yet, but I have to say, ever since I had his headshot sent to me to prep the flyer, it just cheers me up seeing this man smile. So I've looked forward all night, all week, to hear him speak. He is the executive director of the Genwell Project. He's been that since 2016. And that's a not-for-profit that offers tips, tools, and ideas for building healthy connections. He's a social change leader, and he's our disruptor this month, who believes that doing the right thing every day will create exceptional results. I just think it's wonderful someone's that hopeful in the world. Building a more connected world in that way, he says, will lead to a happier and healthier society. Before he ran the Genwell Project, he spent 5 years building Movember, which we've all heard of. It's a monster fundraiser. That was all Pete's work. And so please join me in welcoming him.
Thank you, Julie. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got a little bit of a raspy voice tonight, but I think I can get through this. So thank you so much for that introduction. And Carrie, I'm emotional in listening to your story, but I hope what I'm about to share now can be part of the solution, and also to the work that, Yvonne, the story that you're telling about how we help people feel welcome and included everywhere they go, and that we all feel like we're part of, as Jillian put in there, we're all part of one blood. My name's Pete Bombaci, and I'm the founder of the Genwell Project, as Julie said, and we're Canada's Human Connection Movement. And we've been working to build a more connected Canada since 2016 by educating, empowering, and catalyzing Canadians around the importance of face-to-face social connection for our health, our happiness, our longevity, and for the betterment of society. We do this each and every day through our social media, through our media, through our website, as we work to educate people about just how important social connection is for our health and happiness. We've educated people about the importance of physical activity since 1971. We've had food guidelines since 1942. And over the course of the last several decades, we've talked about don't drink too much, don't smoke, get your 8 hours of sleep and 8 glasses of water. The reality is we've never educated people about the importance of their social connections, or as we describe it, their social health, which is the proactive upstream solution to building better mental and physical health. So now we have a pandemic that rips us out of the lives of each other. Although we've had 60 years of building a more disconnected world, for those of you who are familiar with Robert Putnam's work in Bowling Alone. So we have a real crisis on our hands right now. We've heard about the loneliness crisis, but really our focus is about educating people about the power of human connection, not just to combat loneliness, but to actually combat many of the challenges that we face, whether it's homelessness, food insecurity, or frankly, how people can thrive through the challenges that we face day to day. You can feel lonely or disconnected going through a divorce, going through a job loss, financial insecurity, new mom, new dad, so many different things in our life. And I think part of the education that we believe a society needs is that we've kind of put a stigma around loneliness. And what we need to recognize is that loneliness is no different than thirst or hunger. It's a human reaction to a lack of connection. When I'm hungry, I go get something to eat. People don't make fun of me, don't roll their eyes at me, although some of the choices I might make, you might roll your eyes at me. When we get something to drink, nobody makes fun of us. But the reality is, for some strange reason, we've turned loneliness, which is the human reaction of feeling disconnected, into an issue. And the reality is, what we really need to help people understand is that is actually a good thing. That when we understand we feel disconnected from other people, the key is that we inform people that there are many ways in which we can build social connection into our lives. For example, we just ran Talk to a Stranger Week. It was a week-long campaign encouraging Canadians to talk to strangers for many reasons, but it also includes the fact that it makes us happier, increases trust, increases a sense of community, a sense of belonging, reduces our sense of loneliness or disconnection. But that's just one thing. Those who talk to strangers at least once a week are up to 3 times happier than those that don't talk to strangers. If you talk to your neighbor, those who talk to their neighbor for at least 1 hour a week are up to 3 times less lonely. But again, 50% of Canadians didn't know their neighbor's name before the pandemic. And only 20% of Canadians talk to strangers, even though we've told people for 50 years not to talk to strangers. So our goal is to educate people about all of these facts and figures around the importance of social connection. And here's really what the outcome is. When we feel disconnected, it impacts our mental health and our physical health. It's not just anxiety and depression or suicide and addiction. It's heart disease, it's diabetes, it's obesity, and it leads to basically inflammation in the body, which can lead to all the illnesses that we face in society. But the good news is that the research shows us that social connection can actually have so many benefits. The Harvard study, Robert Waldinger, single greatest contributor to happiness in our life. It increases empathy, compassion, and resilience, something as we listen to the stories tonight, I think we can all benefit from more empathy and compassion in the world. It strengthens our immune system, our self-confidence. A study came out during the global pandemic. It's the single greatest preventative action we can take to avoid depression. And we have the highest levels of anxiety and depression in some cases in Canadian history. We have a long road to go to educate all Canadians about the importance of their social connections and social health. But that's what the Gen Well Project has been trying to do since 2016. And as I leave and finish up these comments before we get into a Q&A, I hope everybody will go and check out our website, follow us on our social channels, sign up for our newsletter, because together we can make the world a happier and healthier place, one face-to-face conversation at a time.
So hopeful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Believe you're a Ted Lasso fan?
I am a massive Ted Lasso fan.
That's kind of what he was about, right? Connecting.
That's what
the
it's
team.
all about.
Yep. Yes. Don't be shy, folks. I have some questions. I'm sure you do too. Interrupt me. I'm just going to ask you, you talked about what inspired you was the blackout in 2003. And I remember that well. I was camping at Presskill Park, and the only way I knew there was a blackout on was they were selling the ice really cheap out of the camp store before it could melt.
Yeah.
And kept us going a few days longer. Where were you when it happened, and why did that hit you so hard that you wanted to change things?
You know, it's funny. I worked in the beer industry at that point, and I was at the office out at the airport, made my way home. And what was beautiful about that is during times of crisis, we are an amazing human species. We don't worry about who's got what or what our next meeting is. We help everybody. And I witnessed people directing traffic, helping people across the street. But it was actually what happened later in the night that inspired the entire movement. Is I went to a friend's house, and at 9 o'clock at night, after being at a backyard barbecue where there was 2, and then there was 6, and then there was 10, and then there was 20 people, including the neighbors that they'd never spoken to before. At 9 o'clock at night, I walked out on the patio of this guy's house, and I looked out on the street, and the street was filled with people. And I lived on Lawrence Avenue in Toronto. For anybody who knows Toronto at all, it's a pretty busy thoroughfare. So I didn't know my community because there was a lot of traffic there. So I just assumed that everybody on the street knew each other. And I walked out onto the street and I said, I love streets like this where everybody knows each other. And they looked at me and said, we don't. And I thought to myself, well, isn't that a mistake? That we have to wait for a crisis where somebody turns off all the power and all the distractions that we face every day before we actually come out and actually get to know our neighbor. And so I heard stories of people in downtown office buildings, people who walked tens of miles or who were picked up on street corners. I have a great story of a lawyer who was picked up downtown. His wife called him and said, hey, where are you? He said, I'm on my way home. And he said, how are you getting home? He said, somebody picked me up on the street corner. And she said, who? And he said, I don't know. And he put his hand over the phone and said, what's your name, by the way? And so how beautiful are we as a human species when we know we need each other? And unfortunately, we often forget about it, a day, a week, a month later. And I think we're seeing some of it now. So hopefully we can remind people that we are all, of the same blood, or we are all have far more in common than we have that differentiates us.
How much of this is online alienation? Like some people live their whole life, it seems, online. Is that part of why we're not connecting with one another?
Yeah. And, we're not an anti-technology campaign. We're about focusing on the solution of human connection. In the famous words of Dr. Phil, we've been telling people to put down the technology for a couple decades now. And how's that working? Not so good. So we believe that the solution to this is about educating people. We have to recognize we are up against teams of behavioral scientists behind all of the platforms whose sole purpose is to distract us from living our lives. And their business models aren't changing anytime soon. So the only solution is for us to recognize as individuals that we need to change, but maybe more importantly, and this is a big part of our entire movement, is saying the solution is not always me taking all the action. For too long, we've told people that self-care is about you taking action to improve your life. We need to recognize we are all in this together. And when it comes to social health, we can't do it alone. We need somebody else to actually be open to a conversation with us. We need somebody to reach out to us when we don't feel like reaching out. And so when it comes to digital technology, especially when I think of our young people, I really do want to encourage people, if you know somebody who's struggling, whether they're old or young, but we hear about it so often in our young people today. If you know somebody who's young, who's struggling, or the parents of somebody who's telling you that their kid's struggling, go be a mentor. Go see if you can spend some time with them. Take them and shoot hoops. Take them for a coffee. Go do something with them, just like somebody hopefully was there when you were young. This time that we spend with young people today, or with anybody who's struggling, may be more valuable than anything you could ever do in your life to help another person.
We have a comment. Jillian McLean says, 9 months after the blackout, more babies were born.
That is very true.
Human connection. Absolutely. Thank you, Jilly. I'm going to ask you to round out our evening night, but give us 3 tips that will help us make better, healthier social connections.
Well, I really do believe the starting point is talk to strangers or talk to anybody, and we don't need deep, meaningful conversations with everybody we walk by, but acknowledge people, say hello, smile, those little interactions. Dr. Julian Sandstrom out of the UK has done tons of research. Over 90% of the time when we reach out to a stranger, engage with a stranger, it works out as a positive experience for both people. So we are changing lives just through a simple smile and a hello. Number two, consider volunteering. Volunteering is a great way not only to have purpose, but a great way to meet other like-minded, empathetic, and compassionate people who want to make the world a better place. And then finally, if you're serious about it, when we put our calendar marking in to go to the gym on Thursdays at 4 o'clock, or we, put our grocery list because we know we need to get fruit and vegetables, if you need to put it into your calendar to book it and make it regular so that you're going to see Julie every Thursday at 4 o'clock for a coffee. When we take the spontaneity and the effort out of it, it was easy pre-pandemic. We went to the office, we went to the gym, we went to the grocery store. All that stuff was just part of our routines because so many of those routines and habits have been disrupted. Today, we need to make it more conscious and intentional, and we need to put it into our calendars to make it happen.
Thank you. And a final comment from Saida, who says, in my work with the homeless, they appreciate being, she puts it, seen. We all, I suppose, appreciate being seen.
Well, if I can just, Saida, thank you so much for saying that. One of the people on my board is Jim Hughes, is the CEO of the largest homeless shelter in Canada, and that's in Montreal. It's called the Old Mission Brewery. He says the single greatest goal that they have in getting a homeless person back into society is actually getting us to accept them. Because when we don't acknowledge their existence, when we ignore a homeless person on the street, that is the biggest barrier for them, either A, to emotionally feel like they can or are welcome back into society, but then to say, hey, I'm ready to help you and take those initial steps to give you a break. Because oftentimes we're all one terrible incident away from being in that same situation. And once we recognize that, we truly can be part of the solution to welcoming people back in. So Saida, thank you for making that comment.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Julie.
I got a few closing comments here. That's the end of our program, which I thought was excellent. 3 wonderful speakers and a visit from the moderator. Perfect. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Thank you, because that's a very special audience, I thought. So many of you are regulars, and we love seeing you come back again and again. And so you all know that we're going to be sending you a short survey tomorrow and how we did. I'm going to let the newbies know too. We're going to send you a short survey tomorrow, and please let us know your thoughts, how we could make this better. We can make the clubs better. The Reading Club is a free event, but it costs us $3,000 a year for the Zoom plan alone to handle a group of this size. So if you're already a donor to Broadview, I can't say thank you enough to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Your donations help Broadview be able to feature wonderful writers and speakers like Yvonne, Carrie, and Pete tonight. If you're not a donor, please consider making a donation for tonight's event. Sharon's going to post a link for the donations, and there will be one on tomorrow's survey. The reading clubs exist across Canada. If you're interested in joining a local club or starting one of your own, you can check out our information at broadview.org/reading clubs. I think Sharon's going to post that. If your club isn't listed, let us know so we make sure we get you up there. People can find you when they're looking for you. If you can spare a few more minutes this evening, feel free to stay online and we can sort of have an informal coffee hour. If you could make coffee at your home and just be together drinking it. I think Carrie might have to run to her next meeting. I wish she didn't, but we were very lucky to get her and she fit us into her busy schedule. We appreciate that. Otherwise, if you need to be on your way, don't feel bad. We'll miss you, but hopefully we'll see you at the next one is March 4th, 7 o'clock Eastern time. And our publisher editor, Jocelyn Bell, is going to be the host. So we'll be wheeling out the big cheese to run the show that night. And I hope you're here. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone.
Everybody's gone shy. You don't want to have a chat about anything? Nothing on your mind?
Is Yvonne still online?
Yvonne, are you here? I heard a cough. I don't think she is.
Okay,
I can
unfortunate.
send her.
Yvonne is no longer with us. She's signed off.
When they were talking about, it's Nancy Hazen, when they were talking about the gay community, I'm with Broadview United Church. I was on the affirming committee and we are affirming now. And I know I could talk about a couple of instances that have happened, but my question is, why aren't there more, now I live in I'm part of a city of Ottawa. Why aren't there more United Churches becoming affirming? What is their reasoning for not becoming affirming?
I think
That's what I'd like to pose to, I would have liked to pose it to Carmen, but
because Dr. Carmen has departed.
yeah, I know.
Is anybody else a member of an affirming church here? Can you talk about how you got there, or if you'd like to be an affirming church and you're not, what the stumbling block is? Anybody want to share?
Well, I can tell you how we became, because
Yes, please.
there was I'm the choir at Barhaven, and there was years ago there was a 19-year-old that joined our choir, and for some reason, I don't know, because we have family suppers, he just became part of our family, and he eventually came out and told us that he was gay, and we knew it all along. We were just waiting for him to be comfortable enough to say it. But he came to our house for everything, for Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas. He'd drop in if he was tired, and because his family, he could not come out to his family. They used to make insulting comments about gay people. So I approached our minister and I said, look, I'd like us to go through the process of becoming an affirming congregation. And an excellent resource is Open Hearts, and we ran that off. Still have my copy. And it took us about 2 years because we had to interview all the people in our congregation, all the groups in our congregation. And, we'd have people say, well, we know we're welcoming, but I used to say to them, well, if you're gay and you're going by our church, unless there's some kind of something showing that we are an affirming congregation, they might not think we are. And also it's important to put on your website. We also have it on our order of service, Facebook, any of the things that the people looking at a church can see that are gay, gay. So, but I just wondering why there aren't more people going through that process. What's their excuse? Like, apparently the United Church is, the national church is wanting to become an affirming group, or whatever you want to call it. And so why aren't they pushing or saying, look at what is the reason that you're not going through that process, asking more congregations, like maybe an article in Broadview, which I subscribe to, done for years and years. So that was one of the things I would like to pose. The other thing is talking about communications. If I want to talk about my day-to-day, every morning, 6 days a week, seven days a week, we pick up my grand dog, take him down the street to visit his girlfriend, another dog. And sometimes there's other dogs joining us. So we're all sitting around and chatting during that time. Take him back home to my daughters. Then when we went shopping, I was talking to, I was looking for yogurt to make for a dip. And so there was a guy there putting yogurt and other stuff out. And he said, well, I think you should maybe get that one, because we were kind of comparing the yogurts. And so then again, I'm talking to him, and then I'm going and I talked to the lady that's serving us, the cashier. Then I'm going out, and we were babysitting a little Shih Tzu that her mother has mobility issues, and so we had a storm here, and so I was taking the little dog back to the mother, so I dropped her off, picked up another person. This is a multi-faith community that I'm involved with in Ottawa. Anyone familiar with multi-faith groups? They're geared to income. Anyway, so I picked her up, drove her to a few bunch of things, came back, did some, in between I was trying to do a few emails. I don't like being on the computer, but I'm in all these committees, so of course, you know, anyway, you have to do the emails. So anyway, and I got a call from Hearing Life today that the lady, a senior in our church, needed a ride home. So off we go to get her and bring her home. And then I'm doing a few more emails, and then the news came on briefly. Between everything was in the oven ready for supper. So while it was cooking, I was on watching a bit of news to catch my news because I'm a news junkie. And then afterwards that I ate supper and joined you guys. So that was my day today. And that's very, very typical of my day. So talk about communication. I have a lot of it.
All those connections.
Yeah, all those connections.
Anne Hill has made a comment, and she says, is it perhaps just laziness that keeps congregations from becoming affirming?
I don't know.
Are you still here, Anne? I think she's gone. Oh, there you are. There
Yeah.
you are.
Yes, I am here. It is a fairly lengthy process. Our church has sort of half-heartedly thought about it at various times, and then we had a change of minister. And now we have a part-time minister. So it is a fairly lengthy process. Most of us are much older. And I wonder, there must be an awful lot of congregations in the same situation as we are, where oh yeah, we really would like to. We really know we should. We really, I've been living with my wife for 45 years, and yes, we are welcomed. I don't know how many people who look less typical than we do would be as welcomed. I like to think they would. But I really do think that some of it is lethargy. Maybe I shouldn't say laziness, but lethargy. And it's difficult to keep the doors open financially. So it is not top of mind for an awful lot of people. Maybe it would help the bottom line if we were more affirming.
You have to wonder.
Yeah.
How about you take up the challenge?
Yeah. I hear that.
See if you can get hold of Open Hearts, even if you don't take up the challenge, because it's a really good resource. It's got all sorts of good information in it and talks about the history.
Who are they and where are they?
That's a good question. Okay, go online and look for Open Hearts.
Okay.
Magazine. Yeah,
it's a magazine.
It's not a magazine. It's a publication. But I don't know where I got it. It was given to me, so that's not helpful. But maybe
I will dig around.
United Church, probably the national office can help you with that.
Yeah.
Someone there can probably help you with it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay. Now Donna Peerless has posted here to say, all the United Churches I've been involved with in Vancouver and now Salt Spring Island are strongly affirming. I am frankly gobsmacked to learn this is not so across the county. I think she means country though. Gary Patterson, who was our moderator, was the first leader of a mainline church in the world that was legally married to a same-sex partner, and that was years ago. We are an affirming church nationally. I guess I remain an innocent or just lucky.
Yeah.
I wonder whether my church feels that it doesn't need to do anything because it was welcoming to us.
And where are you from?
North of Newmarket.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It may be that because we are so clearly out that it seems as though it's a done deal. But there is not anything on the outside of the church that would state that we are welcoming, and I think that's a big thing.
Does your church fly the Pride flag in Pride Month? Do you do anything like that?
I don't even know whether we possess any flags.
Okay.
Yeah, we are not. We have the Progress flag, but we're not. We just have little symbols. We had a couple of people that are. One of them in particular is a bit of a I mean, he's a former general, so he thinks he knows everything. And he brought up that he didn't want to have the pride flag up. So I said, okay, well, we can put the progress flag that includes the gay community as well as the Black community, as well as all the other accessibility stuff that's if you read in Open Hearts. But we do have things around in our church, like little symbols that are up of different things. Plus, we do have it on our internet, our Facebook, on our program when you come in, the program that you get every Sunday. It's on there that we're an affirming congregation. And also it's on our sign. Even though we don't have a flag, it's on our sign outside too. And we're an affirming congregation. But I mean, there's some people that can be difficult in our congregation. But anyway.
Well, we certainly are an elderly congregation, and I don't think that that's a big part of it. I don't know, I really do think that it's just a process that we've not delved into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the ages of your congregation? Like, I'm 77, so I'm not exactly spring chicken.
There's a lot of us who are over 80, and some in their
okay.
and some in
Okay.
their 90s. Yeah.
Okay.
I think our youngest is probably 65.
Okay.
Maybe
don't-
some, there,
just
I
in the
shouldn't.
chat.
There may be others listening. There's probably some younger than that, but we are definitely older.
Okay.
Gail Brimacombe has posted that Open Hearts is available online.
Okay.
Oh,
You can
okay.
find it online.
Okay.
Okay.
Shall we?
It's a really good resource anyway, just to have, even if you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, shall we close down now? Are we all
Yeah, I'm gonna go. I've
Okay.
got other stuff I
Okay.
gotta do. Check my
fun
emails.
evening?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you all came. Fill out the survey. Tell us how we could be better. We're always looking for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for offering it, though.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.